Hello everybody, I'm here in the React sample project. I'm just going to start it real quick with npm start, and we're going to just get it up and running, and then I'm going to talk a little bit because we are making a big step in this video here. So here's what we've got so far. We just kind of built a ragtag website so we can experiment. So we've been learning a lot about React in this course so far, but we've also been learning a lot about other things too. We've been exploring HTTP, and you guys know by now that that's the protocol that's used for clients and servers to communicate. You know that web applications often have a front end, which is the client, and a back end, which is usually works with the database that we has the data that we want to work with. We've explored asynchronous JavaScript. So that makes JavaScript a real standout, and it gives it a lot of performance advantages over other type models of programming languages. But you also know that it can be messy working with asynchronous JavaScript. So that led us to promises. We learned how to deal with promises. It's supposed to be a way to make it a little bit easier to write code that's asynchronous. So we studied promises, and that led us into Ajax, because the libraries that we use, Fetch and Axios, return promises, those methods. And you learned how Ajax allows you to make HTTP requests from a client to a server, and it doesn't involve loading a web page. We've also been talking about web services. Now, web services is really the theme of the next class, the Web4 class. That's the back end. But you know that these clients, like this React application, ideally it would be communicating with a back end server that then runs database queries and so on and so forth like that. So we've been putting lots of parts together, and in this video we're going to start to put these together and see how they all work together for this React sample project that we've been working on. Now, we don't have a real backend that we can plug into and communicate with, but as you know, we've learned about the JSON server. So that's a great tool that you can use to set up a fake backend so that you can continue to prototype out your front end, and that's what we're going to do right here. Okay, so I'm going to go over to VS Code and open up the terminal, and now you should have already installed JSON server on your development machine. I've already got it installed on here. If you don't, you can refer to the article on JSON server, but you're going to need that in order for this step to work. I'm assuming you've already got it installed. Now, you know how the JSON server works. You have to give it a JSON database file to watch. So what we're going to do here is create a file here. I'm just going to click down and get that blue line around everything here. I want to put this file right in the project folder. So get that blue line around all of the file explorer there, and then choose new file. And then we're going to call it book-data.json. This should look familiar to you. It's the same data that we used in a previous activity, and I'm going to paste the same data into there. So you should have this code available to you. If not, you can grab it from the web page that goes along with this video right here. But this should all look familiar to you. It's basically a collection of book objects, and that's what we're going to use for our JSON server here. Okay, go ahead and save that. And now the next thing we would need to do is to run the JSON server. I'm going to run it here from the terminal, but then I'm going to show you a shortcut way to do it. So here in this terminal, we've got the React app running. You can see that that's the output from running the React app. I'm going to create a new terminal by clicking the plus sign right here, and we can use this one for the JSON server. Okay, so you know how you can start the JSON server. You have to navigate to the folder where the data file is. So we're already there, and you can do npx JSON server like that, and then you have to attach a W option, and that's going to be the file that we want to watch, which is going to be book-data.json. And then you can assign a port number, and we'll just go ahead and use the same port that we've been using. So we use the D switch, and then we've been using port 8080. So that will start the server. Hopefully it's up and running, and now I can see that it's running in the terminal here. Okay, so now I don't want to have to, there's a quicker way that I can do this. So I'm going to kill the server real quick. I'm going to press Control C. That will kill the server. And now we can make a shortcut so that we don't have to remember that npx command. But here it is. I'm going to go to it again. I hit the up arrow there. And here is the npx command that we have to run the JSON server. I'm just going to copy that. It's the same thing we just entered. And then I can put it inside of the package.json file. This is a cool thing, and you probably already know this, but this is a real useful thing. There's a scripts section here, and you can actually run scripts. So what I want to do here is, you can see that the scripts section has a bunch of other key value pairs in it already. Make sure you put a comma at the end of the last one that's in the script section, because we're going to add another one here. Now this is JSON, so we have to put quotation marks around the key. So we want to make a key called JSON-server. You could name this whatever you wanted, but I'm just going to call it JSON server. And then the value is going to be a string. So I put quotation marks, and that's the command that we want to run. So there's the command that we want to run. And now here's how we can run that command in a shortcut way. So I'm going to save my changes here, and then I'm going to go back down to the terminal, and you can see I'm going to clear the terminal here. So now all I have to do to run this script right here is type in npm run and then whatever we name this here, and I called it JSON server. Okay, so here all I have to do is go npm run JSON server, and that's a little bit less to remember. I don't have to remember the npx JSON server -w-p. I can just do npm run JSON server, and there we go. My server is up and running. If I want to confirm that, I can go over to the browser and go to localhost port 8080/books, and I should see all my books right here. So there they are. There's the 3 books that we're starting with. Okay, now we're going to be using the Axios library, so that's the next thing I need to do. In our samples that we created before, we connected to Axios just by a CDN link, but here we're in a Node project. These React projects, as you know, use NPM and Node, and so the installation's a little bit different here. I'm going to open up yet another terminal. So I got one terminal here with my React app running. I've got another terminal with my JSON server running. I'm going to open up another terminal, so I'll click the plus sign here, and now I can run commands from here. We need to install the Axios library. So here we can do npm install and then Axios. Now that will install the Axios library, and it will be available for us to use in this project now. Okay, there we go. Now that we've got that installed, we can move on to the next step, which is we need to add a book data access component. So this is going to be the component the same exact component that we created in a previous activity that uses Axios to make AJAX calls to a backend server. Okay, now I'm going to give you this code. It's exactly the same, well, almost exactly the same as what we just did in a previous activity where we created the book data access component. Now there's one slight difference. So this code will be available to you on the website, on the web page that goes with this video. So I'll give that to you. I'm just copying it myself here. Anyways, what we want to do is put this component in this project somewhere. It should go in the source folder. Now, a lot of people would organize these components in different ways with folders and files and all that stuff, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to right-click on the source folder and create a folder called API. I've seen that quite a bit. So I'm going to create a new folder and just call it API. So this is a folder that has components that do API calls. If you don't know yet, a lot of times these calls to the backend servers, these AJAX calls, we call them API calls, and we'll be talking more about that later. If not in this course, in the Web 4 course. Okay, so I've got my folder called API here. I'm going to create a new file, and I'm just going to call it book-data-access.js, like that. And this is going to be basically the exact same thing, the same component that we created in a different activity here. I'm going to paste it in. So here are all the methods that make AJAX calls to do the various CRUD operations on the backend server here. Okay, now there is one slight difference. So we're not when we created this the first time, we just created a standalone web page to test it out. But now, because we're using Node and NPM for this project, here's how we can import Axios. So I've added this line right here. So that's the only difference between this file compared to when you did the book data access component. We just need to add that import statement right here, and now it's got access to Axios like that. Now, in the future, we're going to have to deal with how to manage this URL right here. It works fine for now when we're making our requests to the JSON server, but eventually we're going to want to go live with this project, and then it'll be a different base URL. So we will have to make some changes down the road, but for now this is okay. We can just leave that base URL the way it is, but we'll want to make it this URL will change when we go live with this project. We'll worry about that later. So now we can go to work on the book list component. So here that is. Now there's nothing in here. It just basically puts a div here like this. Here's what we're going to do with this component. Before the return statement, we're going to set up a state variable that is going to represent a collection of books. So we're getting familiar with useState a little bit. It works like this: const, it's an array equals useState, like that. Okay, so that's how we can set it up. You know that useState returns an array that has two elements in it. The first one is some variable that represents our state, and then the second one is a function that allows us to change the state or set the state. So I'm going to set it up like that: books and set books. The other thing I want to do is I want to give this an initial value here. So this books is going to be an array. So here I can pass in just an empty array. So we're going to initialize books as an empty array by putting the square brackets, passing that in as the parameter to useState here. Okay, I will have to import useState. Let me do that before I forget. What I can do here is just remove this line. We don't need that, and I'll start over again. I'll do import curly braces, and inside the curly braces I'll put useState. And there we go. So that'll finish. So now I've got the useState function or hook, whatever you want to call it, is imported. Okay. So this component is going to display a collection of books, and that's why we set up the state here, is because we want to render each book inside of our JSX here eventually. But we need to get the books from the back end. So here we're going to use another hook. Now we've seen this, but we haven't talked about it that much. And I have to admit that this hook called useEffect is one of the more confusing ones for people who are learning React. So we'll have to talk about this in class. But what we want to do right here is we want to use the useEffect hook. So here I'm just going to type it in, useEffect. So that's the function that we want to call. Now I do need to import that, so I can go ahead and just add that here to inside the curly braces to the import statement, useEffect. Okay, so I've imported it. Now, like I said, this is a difficult one for beginners of React. I know I struggled with it learning React because it just takes a lot of getting used to. But here's how it works, and we'll have to talk more about this in class. You pass in a function as the first parameter. So go ahead and put in an arrow function as the first parameter there. Got my, there's my arrow function. And then the other thing that you do, there's another parameter. And here, so I'm going to put a comma. And now I'm just going to pass in an empty array for the second parameter. Now this seems awfully strange, but what this means is that by passing in an empty array, it means that we want to run this function just once when the component first loads. Okay, let's not dwell on this too much, but anyways, what we're doing here is we want to trigger this function when the component first renders. So inside of this arrow function, go ahead and split apart those curly braces. Here's where we're going to put our our code that's going to get all the books from our backend. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just call get all books. Now I'll have to import that. Is it going to import for me? Oh, look at that. It did import for me. So there we go. It's importing that function from our book data access component. So here you know that calling this method, there is no parameter that we pass in, but it returns a promise. So I can use either then and catch with this, or I could use async and await. Now, we'll want to talk about that. For now, I'm just going to use then and catch. I don't actually need to add a catch to it because it's going to catch errors inside of the book data access component. So I could add a catch here if I wanted to. I don't have to. Maybe I should. I don't know. These are things we can talk about. But for sure, what I want to do is add a then. So I'm going to do .then here. And then you know that when we use the then method, we have to pass in a callback function as a parameter. And that's going to have what we're trying to get are the books. So here I'm going to type in books. And this is my arrow function. And then I'm kind of abbreviating it a little bit here. There's different ways you could write these arrow functions. But what we want to do in the body of this arrow function is call set books. That's our state right there. And what we're going to do is pass the books we get from the back end, and that we're going to use them to update our books right here. Okay, so just don't be confused. We've got two variables called books, but they're different here. This is our state variable. But then we've also got a parameter called books, and that's the parameter that represents what we get from our get all books here. So we're going to take this books, the one right here. This one is the one we get from the backend server, and we're going to use that to set the state books variable here like that. Okay, so this should give us the data that we're looking for. If I want to test this out, I can just put a console log here, and I'll just console log books, and we'll try this out here. Hopefully this will work. So go ahead and save that, and then go back over to the browser here. Where's my React app? Here's my React app. I'm going to open up the console log down here, and I'm going to go to the books, and I got an error. Okay, so what could be going wrong here? Maybe I didn't save something. Let's see. Well, first let's have a look at the error here. What does the error message say? I'm trying to get, there we go. Something is not a function, get all books. Maybe I forgot to save some changes. Let's see here. Look at that. I didn't save my changes in my book data access component. Okay, let's try this again here. All right. I'm just going to clear the console log, refresh the page. Let's see. There we go. It's empty. It's empty. Where's my console log? Let's see. And I'm realizing that I made a beginner mistake right here. But I've made this mistake many times, and I do it a lot. But let me show you what's going on here. If we go to the book list here, now this console log is going to run before this completes. Remember, we're dealing with asynchronous code here, so it's going to take a while for this to complete. If I wanted to console log the books, I would have to move it into the callback function right there. So we could do that. I'm just going to skip that, but the way I have this set up right now isn't going to work now that I think about it. I could easily just take this console log and put it inside the callback function, and then it should work. But we're so close to, I'm just going to move on, and we'll see this. We'll see our books in just a second here. Okay, let's go ahead and overhaul the JSX. So scroll down to the return statement, and let's go ahead and delete the div here like that. And let's use a fragment. I like fragments because they don't clutter up your markup on your web page. And then we'll put an H2 element here, and we'll just make it say book list like that. And then what we want to do underneath that is we're going to put a UL list, an unordered list. So type in UL like that. And then what we want to do is loop through all the books and generate an LI element for each book that we have. So here's what we can do. go ahead and put in a pair of curly braces. We want to bust into JavaScript right here. And here's where the knowing how to use the map method in JavaScript is super important. So we're going to take our state variable, which is books. That's an array, and we're going to call map on it. So you guys should know very well what the map method does. It returns an array of things. So it allows us to, what we're going to do is loop through the array of books here, and we're going to return an array of li elements. And it's going to look like this. So let me set up the arrow function here. I'll just go ahead and put an arrow function in there. And now we can abbreviate this if we want. Maybe we will when we're done here. But you know that when you call map, the parameter to this arrow function is the current element. I'll just call it B for book. It's going to be a book object that has an ID, a title, and an author. Okay, so here what I want to return here is going to be an li element. Now actually I want to remove these curly braces here, because if I leave these curly braces here, I don't think it's going to return anything. So let's just get rid of the curly braces right there. And instead what we'll put is an li opening tag like that. And then I got my li closing tag like that. And then I'm going to bust into JavaScript. So I'm going to put a pair of curly braces right in between those two li tags. And here I want to display the title. So I'll go b.title. Okay, and now we should hopefully see the title of every book on this page here. So go ahead and save that, and then go back over to the browser. I'm going to clear the log and refresh and see. Okay, so this is a warning here, and I want to talk about this, but let's see if we got our books. There we go. There's the titles to our books. Okay, so this is a big moment right here. We spent a lot of time learning about all these pieces and parts of web applications. So front end, back end, AJAX, HTTP, all those things that we work so hard at to get to this point. Okay, let's talk about this warning now. Whenever you use map to generate something in the user interface, you're supposed to give each element that you're generating, in this case it's an li, each one should have its own key attribute. So this is just a React thing. You don't have to worry about it too much. It's a React thing. But what I need to do is add a key attribute here, and this has to be a unique value. So I'm going to go key equals pair of curly braces, because what I put in there is going to be some JavaScript, and we can use the book ID. So I'll do b.id. Okay, so whenever you use map to generate a bunch of elements, you should add a key attribute to those elements that you're generating. Go ahead and save that, and then the warning should go away here. I'm going to reload the page. Okay, and now no warnings. So I think we saw that key attribute once before, but you do have to do that when you use map to generate a whole bunch of elements that are rendered in your UI. Pretty cool. Okay, now we're going to elaborate on this a little bit more. So now, normally, component-based design would call for us to create a specific component to display a book in the list right here. So we're going to create a new component. It's going to be called book list item, and that's what we'll use here instead of these generic LIs. So what I want to do here is go into the books folder and add a new file. So right-click on the books folder, choose new file. And this component is going to be called book list item. So make sure you capitalize it, right? Capital B, capital L, capital I, and then .js. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and put in the starter code, and we'll make it look like this. First of all, we're going to give it a prop. So we're going to give it the data that it needs to display here. So right there, for the parameter, I'll put in an object, because you know props get passed in as an object, and then inside of the curly braces I'll just name it book. So this is the book object that we got from the server, and we want to display it inside of here. Okay, now I can go ahead and wipe out the return stuff here, get rid of that div, and we want to actually return an li element like that. So there's what we're going to return. And how do we want to set this up? Let's just display the title in bold. So what we'll do is I'll put a B element here, like that. And then we'll take the prop, which is our book, and we'll display its title like this, book.title. Okay, and now the other thing we're going to do is we want to put a link underneath the title here. So I'm going to do this, and we want to go to the book so we can view all of its details, because remember, this is going to show up as an item in our book list component. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a React component called link. This is similar to navlink, but this is not a navigation link. It's not in a nav bar. So that's why I'm just using the link here like this. So let me just go ahead and put in the closing link tag like that. And then in between the opening and closing link tags, by the way, that's a capital L because this is a React component here. I'm just going to make it say view details like that, and then we need to add a to attribute just like we did with the nav bar links. So here I'm going to go to the opening link tag and do to equals pair of curly braces like that. And then what we want to do is we want to navigate to the book section. So I'm going to put a string inside of those curly braces, /books / and now here I want to concatenate onto that string. So I'm going to set it up like that. I'm going to take the book ID, the book is our prop, like that, and then this should link us to the book details page, which we'll get to in just a minute here. Okay, now I do need to import this, so I'm going to go up here, and now that's from the router package, not the React package, so I need to do a separate import here. I'll put in my curly braces like that, and type in capital L link, and then luckily it finished out everything for me, but the link component's in the router package that we use, not the base React package. Okay, I think that's going to do it for this one, and we can try this out now. So to try it out, I'm going to save my changes, and I'm going to go back to our book list component, and I'm going to, instead of using our LI right here like that, I'm going to delete the opening and closing LI tags, and I'm going to instead use our book list item, capital B, book list item, like that. Okay, and then I'm going to put the / and the greater than sign to finish that off. I think it did import it for me. I'm going to have to add some stuff right here, but I'm going to scroll up. Okay, look, I got the import to work for me that time. If it didn't, I would have to manually type that in. So I've imported the component. Now you guys know that, first of all, we need to add that key again. So I'm going to add a key attribute. Key equals pair of curly braces. And this is going to be b.id. We're looping through our books, and each book we've called B. And then I also need to pass in a book prop. So I'm going to add a book attribute and set that equal to curly braces B, like that. And I think that should do it here. Save it, go over to the browser, and there we go. So there we go. Now we're using our book list item. Okay, now we've got these links here. If I hover over these, let's see, is it showing me the links here? Okay, anyways, we've added our links here. And if I click on it, what happened there? Did I do that right? Let's see. Let's see, is it working? Oh, okay, it looks like it's working. Okay, so look, our link takes us to that URL, whichever book you clicked on, because we concatenated the ID into the URL. And so now we're at our book details page, and you can see here that there's that dynamic, there's the param that got passed. So the last thing we're going to do in this video is we're going to update the book details. It's going to take this ID, and it's going to fetch that book from the backend server and display all the details for it. Okay, so let's note this, the last step here. So let's go into the book details component. And let's see what modifications we need to make here. Let's start out by adding a state variable here. So I'm going to put that right here before the return statement, and we'll set it up. The state variable is just going to be a single book here. So we'll go const square brackets, book, and set book, like that. And then I'll set that equal to use state. Okay, now I do need to import use state, and I do want to initialize this to an initial value. Now, I think it's good to initialize your state variables. What I'm going to do is initialize it to basically a blank book object like this. So inside the parentheses there, put in curly braces. So we're going to initialize it to an object that has an ID, and we'll set that ID to 0. And then it's going to have a title, and we'll set that title to an empty string. And it's also going to have an author, and we'll set that author to an empty string too. Okay, now, so basically what we're doing is we're going to initialize this just to be an empty book object. Okay, so there's our state variable. I will need to import useState in a second, but before I do that, hopefully I won't forget, before I do that, let's go down to the JSX down here and rewrite this here. Let's delete whatever's inside of our fragment, and let's put an H2 here, and then what we'll do is we'll display the title of our state variable, our book, so we can put in curly braces, and we'll go book.title like that. And then I guess just to keep things simple, we'll put a paragraph underneath that. So I'll put a P element right there, and then I'll just make it say by colon, and then bust into JavaScript with the curly braces, and then we'll do book.author. Okay, before I forget, I better import useState, otherwise I'll forget. So I'll scroll up here, and I can, here's how I can, I'm just going to get rid of that and put in curly braces, and then I can type in useState. Okay, and now remember we've got the book ID, but we don't have the book yet. We have to fetch that from the server. Here's how we get the book ID. That gets passed to us through the router, and then we need to actually fetch the book from the backend server. So here we're going to have to use useEffect again. I'm going to put it right here. So we'll go ahead and type in useEffect. Okay, and then we want to pass in a few parameters here. I'll go ahead and put that in place. Oh, by the way, look, it imported for me, so I didn't have to add that to the imports right there. useEffect takes two parameters. The first one's an arrow function, and then the second one is going to be, we'll start it off as an empty array, but we'll change that in just a second here. So go ahead and split apart the curly braces. In here, we want to, let's just put an if statement. We just want to make sure that this is not null right here. So we'll do if book ID is truthy, then we'll go ahead and we'll call get book by ID from our book data access component. So inside that if statement, we'll go get book by ID. Nice, it imported for me. There's for our get book by ID that does the API call. We need to pass in a parameter. It's going to be the book ID, so I'll add that there. And then now we know that that returns a promise, so I can put then there like that. And then what I want to do is take the book that the data access component returns and use it to set the book state variable here. So I'm going to type in book, and then the fat arrow, and then here I'll call set book like that, and then pass in the book that we got from the back end. Okay, let's see if this works. Now there is one more thing. There's one more thing. Let's just see what happens though, and then we'll talk about that one more thing. Save it here, then go back over to the browser. I got an error, then is not defined. What did I do here? That's supposed to be a dot, not a comma. See that now. I have to reload. Okay, so it looks like it's working. Now this is interesting. Did I get a warning anywhere? I was expecting a warning. Okay, very interesting. No warning. Where's my... I'm just poking around here. All right, here's the warning. You should be seeing a warning sheet about some missing dependency, and but it's just a warning. It's not crashing anything. But let's try out the app here and see how it's working. So I'm going to go back to books. Here it fetches all books from the backend server and creates hyperlinks using the link component in React. There's our Harvey Popper, which should be Harry Potter book, and it looks like it's working. Okay, so this is pretty cool. So what we do is we create these hyperlinks that have the book ID into them, and then we pass the ID through the route parameters. This component, the book detail component, that should probably just say book, not, or no, anyways. So here, this component, this is the book details component. It gets the ID of the book through the router, and then it fetches the whole book object from the backend server and displays it here. So a huge step here, and we're going to be doing a lot of components like this in our final project. I think that's everything. I do want to talk about the warning that we got. Okay, now I mentioned earlier that useEffect is one of the trickier hooks to learn about in React. Okay, so if you put an empty array right there, that means that the function, this first function, is going to get triggered just once when the component first renders. Okay, but what we theoretically want to do is anytime the book ID changes, we would want to do another get book by ID call here and get the new book. So, and because we're referring to a variable inside of here, it wants us to put that in this, what we call, this is called the dependencies array. So I can make that warning go away by adding book ID to that empty array right there. Now we'll need to talk about this in class. Like I said, useEffect is kind of a tricky one, but it's important. So if I put book ID inside that empty array, I think that should take care of all my warnings here. Did it still? Okay, I've got a warning from some other stuff going on that I probably need to clean up. But anyways, I think that should take care of the warning now. Okay, all right. I think that's going to do it for this video. Big step for us. Lots of stuff going on now.